Hey, smart authors, welcome back to another episode of the Smart Author Podcast. Today, I am joined by Sean Vosler. Sean is an incredible human being, and he actually runs a platform called Movable Type. And the whole concept behind Movable Type is to generate a book with a big idea. So you give it a big idea, it'll generate a book, but you can furthermore upload any content that you have to the platform to go ahead and actually assist in developing the core concepts and ideas of the book. Now, the reason why I had a fantastic conversation with Sean today is because usually that stuff is either very manual or you have to outsource it and spend 50 grand or more for a ghostwriter. So this conversation with Sean is all around Movable Type and how he actually influences AI and utilizes the APIs and all the things within his platform to actually produce amazing outputs in the forms of books that actually sound like you, that read like you, that talk like you. And then a whole suite of other things around that, like audio book production and things like that. So you're going to get a lot out of this episode if you're wanting to write a book or you want to write another book, but you don't want to do it manual this time. You want to actually utilize AI, but AI that has a specific purpose and provides you with the frameworks and the structures to actually produce amazing book outputs, and not just essentially having a GPT assistant prompt you through the process, because we all know what the outputs of that can be like sometimes. So hope you enjoy this episode. It is a bit of a longer one because Sean and I went really deep and had a lot of tangents, but they were all amazing conversations, and I am really excited for you to check them out. Enjoy the episode. Hey, Sean, welcome to the show.
Dude, great to be here, Chris. This is awesome. Excited to talk books with you, man.
So, dude, I'm really stoked I was even able to track you down to get you here today. Because if anyone knows Sean is notoriously hard to get a hold of. Probably for the right reasons.
Even for my people in my company, so don't feel too bad about it. But no, it's funny. I've been following your stuff for a while. You may not know that I'm watching, but no, I anybody who works in the book world, and you specifically in the book marketing world, I was like, dude, this is awesome. So I've been keeping an eye on what you're doing when we were able to connect. No brainer for me to jump in and talk shop with you for sure.
Yeah, well, today you're all in on Movable Type and what you guys are doing over there, which is really exciting, and we'll circle back to that. I'd love to know, what led to Movable Type, and obviously before Movable Type, you were an author, and after that, you worked for another copywriting AI, company as well. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what led you here.
Sure. Yeah, man. It's an interesting, well, at least to me, it's interesting. I started this whole gambit down the road to AI way before AI. The world of copy, and I know you work in that a lot with your clients and communicating the essence of why somebody should do something, right? Why they should buy something, why they should get involved in this business, whatever. That type of messaging has always been fascinating to me. So when I started down into the rabbit hole of marketing, learning about persuasion, all the mechanisms that come in language, and even just the weird anthropological interactions of humans and how we communicate, it's all super fascinating to me. So as I progressed in my former life as an agency runner and marketing manager for a bunch of companies, it was always kind of a means to dig deeper into the craft of persuasion and writing. Mm. And it's always, that's been kind of the driving fascination a lot of times. And then being able to transition from that into the solution to this riddle which has been found in AI, it was a no-brainer for me to transition into that and try to learn those mechanisms as well. So it's been a same kind of journey. It's taken a lot of different paths along the way.
Yeah. Well, the thing I love about what I'm seeing you develop in public with Movable Type is you kind of nerd out about it at such an extent that's just like it's almost contagious. Where I've seen other people, they see the AI bandwagon, they jump on the hype train, right? But they just do it so that they can kind of like get in on the trend and try to make some money from it, or try to get some level of traffic or awareness because it's such a big, interesting, hypey kind of topic right now. Whereas like I've seen you, and it's almost like the polar opposite. It's like you truly believe in like what the actual functions and capabilities of AI are, and you're like just going so deep on developing everything, and it's just like you're almost obsessed with like the product and what you're producing.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you say that, because I mean, I right at the kind of when GPT-3 had really taken off, and I used to work for Jasper.ai, which is still, they're doing great. But I was involved with those guys early on as an affiliate, and then I came on as their affiliate manager, just because I wanted to get closer to the world of AI, right? And it's funny, I probably could have monetized the knowledge I had around the topic a lot more efficiently by making it more of like a business opportunity type thing. But the bigger picture of this stuff is really fascinating. I think a lot of people, we're really about a year and a half out of, is it a year and a half? Yeah, about since ChatGPT came out, right? Which is when the public consciousness really blew up about AI. And there's all these like crazy discussions about what it could do, what it couldn't do, what jobs it's going to take, what it doesn't. And to me, like a lot of that, it's fascinating, but the reality of it is that this technology, it shores up a lot of the areas in our lives that take so much time and energy to perfect and get done well. And in my world specifically, in book structure and in language structure, that these models, these large language models, do it so efficiently and effectively. To me, that's really the golden opportunity right now, is not so much what it can generate, but what it can do with the knowledge and insights you already have to communicate it better to people. So that's the fascinating side. I talk to a lot of people who are just mad geniuses in their world, right? But you ask them to explain it or teach it, they might be able to do it off the cuff a little bit, but to actually write it out in a structured linear way that someone else can digest it well, that's a whole other skill set. Most people assume that that's pretty straightforward, but in reality, it's like learning anything else. It takes a lot of time, and AI has a lot of that innate ability built into the technology. All we have to do is learn how to work with it and put our knowledge into it to have it do that work for us. So it's fascinating for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people struggle with, okay, cool, I've got this information, and then they just go so hard on just feeding, GPT or whatever, all of the information, and expect like a really good outcome. But I think both you and I know that is most likely going to end up in you just getting like the worst thing imaginable. So how does AI, like the way that Movable Type is developed, like how does that actually help someone to condense information into something that actually produces a really good outcome? And then like, what is the for people who don't know, what is the core function of Movable Type in the first place?
Yeah. So that's a good question, because it's funny, like this technology, it moves so fast. So keeping up, and it's like my full-time gig is to keep up with this stuff. And it's like, I'm still like trying to figure out what the heck's going on. So just so people are clear, like tools like ChatGPT and Claude and even Grok, like these tools that you log into and you can interact with, right? They're framed and built as assistants. They call them, AI assistants. And in the back end of these engines, their primary aim is to like deliver to do whatever you tell it to do. Like you ask it to write a recipe, it's going to do its best to get there, right? And it comes with some issues because its prime directive is to like answer your question, not necessarily to be right, correct. And you get these things called hallucinations, which is a pretty common issue in the AI world. And it'll write something that sounds right, and you look at it and it reads so confidently that like the Olympics in 2024 are in Beijing and or something like that. Like, so it'll make up stuff to make it sound awesome. What we've done with Movable, and to kind of mitigate that, and just so people know that the engine itself, we're building off these models to help people write books. That's why we're having this conversation. But it's not so much about the generative technology, and that, so folks know, that's what you call in the AI space. It's when it's creating something from pretty much nothing, like just your inputs. It does that, but I'm mainly focused in the core like momentum behind Movable Type is extraction. So pulling out the information from you. At the moment, we don't have this live just yet, but I'm super excited because we're right on the edge of pulling this out where it'll verbally interact with you and ask you questions about your expertise and all that fun stuff. At the moment, you upload information to it and it'll parse it and put it into a book form. But that to me is really what the magical part of this stuff is. And it was born out of that interest I have in the world of like language and structure and all that jazz. But also from my personal experience of writing a book. It was so funny. It was like almost like, how many stages are there in grief? 12 stages? No, that's alcohol. No, I don't know. Whatever the stages of grief, there's stages of when you're writing a book of like denial and like, bargaining, where you're overwhelmed, and you start out thinking like, this can't be that hard. I read books all the time. And you might get a chapter down, you might get an outline down, and you start freaking out because you're like, oh my gosh, this is not like, it's not intuitive, because writing isn't necessarily intuitive. So a lot of what drove the mechanics of Movable Type was my own experience in that world, because I'm sure anybody listening to this could probably agree that I might have a little bit of ADHD, because I go in one direction and I swing back and then I come back, and that I guess now they call it neurodivergent. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that term, but whatever. People in that condition, it's not a disability, I promise. They have a lot of knowledge, but structuring it for someone else, it's such a task, and it's anxiety driven. It is painful, and that was my experience writing my book. I grew a lot, but the thing I realized was like, I wanted the book not for the experience of writing. I had no real intent on being a quote unquote author. Like, I think that's what a lot of people miss out on in this kind of conversation is, do you want to be an author or do you want to have impact? You can have both. But if your only concern is impact, well, then spend 50 grand and get a ghostwriter who can write, like that's going to be your fastest step there. And if I would have had $50,000 to drop at the time on a ghostwriter, I probably should have, right? For writing my book. With technology the way it is, and I think you probably have a more savvy audience on the technical side, I would imagine, maybe not, but being able to leverage these AI systems, it's incredible what you can do. So that is a roundabout way of answering your question, about 5 different ways. So I'll leave it there, but it is such a fascinating area to be playing in, to be working in at the moment, and it's going to open up some floodgates that in the book world specifically, but just in the knowledge condensing and sharing world, it's going to be a really powerful tool. Already is, but it's getting even better.
So is there some like evolution coming to the platform where it's not just about books anymore? It's more about like, how do we create these other assets that we can utilize for our marketing, for our communication, and so on?
I like the way you lead these. No, that's a good question. It's interesting. Like books, it's a no-brainer because everybody knows what a book is. There's a pretty straightforward like general structure for a nonfiction book. It's like, I have a problem, looking for a solution. I'm going to read this book. That's the majority of the types of frameworks of the books we work with right now. Now, whether it's a book, a podcast, an audiobook, a YouTube series, like the actual end output, we can manipulate the information into just about anything we want. Right now, we're focused on books because it's almost like a romantic's the wrong word, but like books are very special, I think, to society, and we can talk about that a bit more because there's some really interesting, just the idea of this physical. I don't have a book in front of me. Ironically, I'm in someone else's office at the moment. Here
I have one. Here you go.
There we are. Oh, hey, look at that. Even better. So that book in particular, 7-Figure Marketing Copy, for those interested. That was my attempt of dumping as much knowledge as I could on the subject into a book, which is a very bad way to write a book, by the way. Would not recommend it. I felt like I was writing a textbook by the end of my process.
I'm pretty sure you did end up there.
It's getting there, and I'm not even done with it. I've released a couple different versions. I'm still in love with that thing. It's a love-hate. It's codependent relationship, really. But the idea that this can hold the solution to a problem I have and change my life's trajectory is magical to me. And I love podcasts. We all listen to podcasts. We all watch YouTube. But something too about just the finality. Like, it has a last page, right?
Yeah.
Podcasts are open-ended. Everything else is open-ended these days. It's a very magical format, in my opinion. So with Movable, we have a lot of those mechanics built into it. Like, it'll generate marketing materials because once you need to understand the same things to market a book as you do to write a book from a audience perspective. So we're able to extrapolate from the target audience, who it's written for, who it's written by, and pull, all the marketing material to sell the book on Amazon and through advertising directly through the platform. So it does that fun stuff, does audiobooks. But at the moment, the nut I'm trying to crack and the fun thing I'm working on daily now is more of like a traditional ghostwriter interactive kind of approach to creating the book. So in fact, here's an open loop. At the very end of this, I'll give you like the 10-second demo of that. It's pretty interesting. Okay. We'll play with that. But for anyone listening, I find that most people, and I'd love your take on this actually, most people have like a book in the back of their mind that they've had wanting to write forever. And for me, I had a very different experience, motivation for why I wrote my book, which we can explore. But I'm curious, in your line of work, working with people, obviously you're usually working with folks when they have their finished book. What have you found to be like the crux of why they actually ended up creating their book, their motivation?
Almost always it's based around how do I get more authority and impact in the marketplace, and also this is going to be an epic lead magnet for my business,
So very practical and tactical, and people miss out, and that's not the average. So the beautiful thing about what you're doing with your agency is you're helping people accomplish that goal, right? And they're on board. Obviously, they're paying you to market it, and it's not about necessarily the $10 to $30 you might get for the book. It's about the ascension, right? That into the services and other options. Well, the mistake most people make is they write a book because they're passionate about the subject matter. Now, you should be passionate about the subject matter. Like there's no doubt, but you also need to keep those other parts of the puzzle in mind, like you just articulated. If you have no plan for getting it out into people's hands to read, like you're going to be shouting into the void most of the time. Like the average book does not get much traction. for me to get traction, it was an advertising game, and I got pretty darn good at it. It sounds like I need to talk to you guys about taking that to the next level. But I think a lot of folks, and if you're listening to this, you have a book idea, like I would encourage everybody, screw AI. Like creating something is a magical experience. But at the end of the day, if the goal is to get it into the hands of the people you want to help, don't be afraid to leverage tools like AI. Movable Type is one of many tools. I think we're the best because I'm a little partial, but it's funny. So many people don't get started because they haven't given much thought to why they actually need the book to be created, whether it be a tactical reason. And most go about it from an ego standpoint. An ego isn't strong enough to finish a big daunting project like that. You need more of a strategic plan of what you're going to do with that book and what it's going to mean for the people you want to help. And it's fascinating. That's a big part of our job on, after the software is done. It's like, all right, now what do you do with this thing? And we're still, I want to talk with you guys obviously more about that, but that's still a piece of the puzzle that I think most people don't do enough with.
Yeah. And ultimately I think like if you're going to go through the hassle and the process of writing a book, and even if you have like a strategic vision that you want to accomplish, frankly, not spending money or putting it into action with advertising it's a waste in my opinion. Like a lot of people can do a lot with organic traction and I had Andrew Kapp on the show who sold 100,000 copies of one of his books just through Amazon pretty much, and creating YouTube channels around it and continuously publishing and all of that kind of stuff. But it's a slug, right? Like it's direct energy and output to get the outcome of selling books consistently. And for me, it's like I kind of I feel so bad for people who have like awesome messages and they want to get this book out into the world, but then they haven't like really strategically thought about like, is it the right book? And then can I actually advertise it to push it out? And I think that's just such a big mistake.
Well, and one of the nice things about the platform, with Movable is we give people the ability to generate lots of different versions of the same kind of idea. So they can create iterations and expand it, contract it. And we're still so early in this approach to creating anything that I don't think there's a right or wrong way. We're trying to find the proper approaches. But what I have found with that approach, it's funny. A lot of folks, it's almost like walking into an art gallery and you may not like be able to create the art you see, but you can identify if that's art that means something to you, right? Or you can tell that's a very well done painting versus a Picasso, which looks like no, I'm just kidding. So it's funny that approach of letting people kind of play with the information, generate lots of different versions, interact with the content. We found that to be a very cathartic, it might be the wrong word, but it's a very empowering experience for a lot of people because they've had this idea. And just to give people kind of a basic overview of how this engine works is you start with your thesis, your big idea, your big concept behind your book. And every good book has one of these. It's with, what's the book? How to Win Friends and Influence People. The idea is like the big idea behind it is if you want to influence people, sometimes you got to lose the battle to win the war. If you break that down, like there's a 1 paragraph chunk there that defines that book, right? And we help people kind of work with it and generate it. But a lot of times people come in, they have that already in their mind. They'll plug that in, and that's the starting point to generate the book proposal. Then finally actually generate the entire first manuscript, about 100, 200 pages. And the idea being that they get to see in front of them like an impressive approach to articulating what they know they want to say before they said it. and I know the objection out there, and I hear it, and it's something that is more of a philosophical discussion, but it's like, what does it mean if you didn't actually type every single word, right?
Yeah.
But it is fascinating to see people like, there it is. That's what I was looking to say. Now, at that phase, generally the idea is I and this is for every one of our users, it's like, I want you to go in and I want you to refine this. We have an engine in there to kind of give you a tone and style, to detect your tone and style, all that jazz. But I still think a big part of the experience is going in and refining it, being the editor, all that good stuff. So, we're not losing all the humanity aspect of it. I could have just, I could have turned this thing on to be just a Kindle, churn engine and probably done pretty well with it. But that's not the bigger picture of this stuff for sure, to me anyways.
I mean, I think we're missing that auto-publish to Kindle button directly in the platform.
They asked for it. I'm like, we're doing so much up to that step. Like, I want you to do a little bit now. But yeah, and that's, again, that goes back to our point of what is the end game here, right? Most of the books on that shelf behind you have something in common. Most of them were probably written by ghostwriters, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, like, some of my favorite books were ghostwritten, but they were the ideas extracted by incredibly insightful people. So, if you look at ghostwriting as a tool, an expensive tool, something like AI shouldn't intimidate people, or, I don't see it much different than a ghostwriter at this phase. In the next few years, it's going to be absolutely even more insane. But yeah, it's something I think people get afraid of before they even really give it to, any more thought. They're just like put off by it. But a lot of utility in being able to get to that impact point with the product, as opposed to spending, I think I calculated it once, I spent an average of 4 hours per page on my book. So it's about 800 hours, which I'm a bit of meticulous with. It's a little probably overkill, but yeah. So I digress. But that's really what we're trying to solve for people, is get to the point where you're actually able to do something with this, as opposed to spending all this time trying to maybe get to the point you can do something with it.
Yeah. Well, I actually, another thing I really love about Movable Type and the whole thought process around it as well is, you basically build the billing based around credit generation. So it's like, it's almost promoting the fact that someone can be a multiple times author, not just have a or the book, so it's like, it's a book in the process, not the book. And so, like, not only do you have like the iterate generations of the book that they're currently writing, but it's like, hey, you can actually refine and produce other books around your expertise and other things that you're interested in, which really is genius from a marketing and angles testing perspective. It's really like reducing the amount of effort and energy that can go into split testing different ideas and how they convert to business or clients on the back end of those specific books as well, which, from a marketer's perspective, like, if I had a client who was like using Movable Type and the book that we're trying to market, sometimes we try for 3 months and don't really get traction. It just happens. But if we could just go in and go, why don't we just try this different angle that also correlates to your business and write a book around that instead, and then have that as the front end, and just like almost being able to split test ideas based on a whole actual book.
Yeah, well, and it's so the niching down and up, or sideways, or however you want to call it, of the core idea into different avenues. So, like, for instance, and I can't think of a series off the top of my head. You might have one in mind, but it's like, I remember these like little sales manuals, and they were like, it was like the sales guide for real estate agents, the sales guide for this, that, and the other thing, what a lot of our users end up doing is they get kind of a generalized book that kind of pulls together the essence of their big idea and articulates, we work with frameworks and processes that get generated throughout the book and all that. So it creates a very robust manuscript to start with, and it can be on a general topic, but then they can take that same manuscript and retool it into different niches, depending on, that sales example is a pretty straightforward one. But it opens up doors very quickly to move things into a different direction. We don't have this live yet, but maybe we'll test it with some of your authors. But we have the ability for folks to upload a book they've already written, right? And the idea is, at the moment, I want to, we do audiobooks and translations in about 50 different languages, but I also love that idea of retooling the entire book to focus on another niche. And to me, that's a very powerful approach. It solves a lot of the marketing problems. You know how difficult it can be to sell a general book at scale. Selling in a couple niche versions of it makes the starting point a lot easier, for sure.
Actually, one that comes to mind is Mike Michalowicz and Profit First, and like licensing around different niches. So like he obviously has the Profit First framework, but he licenses that ideas to people who want to be able to utilize it for their own marketing, for their own business. And so like I've seen Profit First for tradies, like trades professionals. I've seen Profit First for accountants. I've seen all these different like Profit First books that are out in the marketplace. And that idea just like kind of sparked that for me. It's like you could actually just take that one angle, re-niche it, and then license that niche to someone who could actually leverage it.
It's well, and we built it in kind of a sandbox mode, right? Like we give you some guidance, but you can do some crazy creative stuff with this engine. We recently, and I'm really proud of this. It almost sounds overly simple, but I've been very impressed with the impact of this new feature we just rolled out, where I built it for my brother. Actually, he's got a PhD in education. Creative leadership is his doctoral thesis was on, and I couldn't make heads or tails of his. I tried to read it. It's all academic awesomeness. I don't understand it. However, like I realized, I'm looking through it, I'm like, there is some golden nuggets in here that if it was just explained in a simpler way, this could be a best-selling book. It just, no one can read this dissertation except who its audience is, which is a panel of academics. So we built in a tool, still kind of early, it's live on the platform now, but you can upload just about anything as kind of the base corpus of the book. And the first test case was with my brother's, and he's now working on editing the kind of pop version of the book. I don't know what to call it yet. I need to find a better name. But it's the layman's version of his doctoral thesis. It spit out 170 pages in about 25 minutes, and it blew his mind. He's like, what the heck? Like, this is insane. Something else we do, and this can be applied to Movable Type or ChatGPT or any AI platform, and I highly recommend people do this if you want to leverage AI, is come up with an instruction set, so a prompt that really encapsulates how you want to sound in the output. We call them author personas, but all it is really a set of instructions that guides the AI into writing in your style. Now, it's really fun. But what most people do incorrectly when they go through this phase is they assume that they have a writing style.
Yeah. Most
people don't, right? Like most people, and anybody listening to this, let's all step back and swallow our egos a little bit. Most of our writing is like text messages and like the odd email, maybe a blog post here and there. But unless you've spent, hundreds of hours working on articulating the approach to writing that you take, you don't necessarily have a tone and style. However, I bet you have an idea of what you would like to sound like, right? Like,
Yeah, sure.
and I fall in this boat too. I have my own kind of style guide that I wrote for myself when I was writing my book. I said, you're a little witty, but not too smart. You make good points, but not you're not overbearing with them. So I like came up with my own set of like how I want to sound when I'm writing. And so what we end up doing, because we had it where like people could upload like a sample of their work, and it did okay articulating how they sound. But since most people don't actually have a real tone and style, what we found works better, and the approach we take now for the most part, we actually pull in people's LinkedIn profiles. So we pull in their posts, their background, their experience, all the demographic data that we can pull from there with their consent. Of course, they connect with it. But then we use AI again to articulate what we think, given their background experience, what niches they're writing in, what their tone and style should be. And it's really funny because when I first did this, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. 99 out of 100 people that went through this were like, holy crap, that's how I sound. They perceived it, right? It was almost like a horoscope or something. Like, it's general, but it's very specific to your background. So anyhow, like, I recommend that for anybody who's like using AI, like, create a style guide, tell the whatever it is, ChatGPT, whatever, about yourself, like your background, your education, where you're from, and say, hey, take all this information about me and write me a tone and style guide to use in my writing, and specifically for when I'm generating content. Like, that is a magical piece of verbiage that you can store on a Google Doc and paste in when you're using AI. We just happen to generate it in our platform for the users, but it makes a huge difference on the output. So we can stylize it to match the tone and style we're looking for that unique individual.
Yeah, that makes sense, because like usually the output is just so there's just, it's got all the buzzwords and emojis.
Delve, labyrinth,
skyrocket,
sure.
Revolutionize.
Well, and here's the thing that people don't realize unless you're like really into the tech of it. Those tools like ChatGPT and stuff, amazing tools, but they are, as we talked about earlier, like they're programmed to be assistants. They're not, their output isn't, and anybody who's used it for like the last year and a half has noticed that trend downwards in the quality of the outputs, because they're trying to find a medium, a middle ground that appeals to anybody. When you do that, you lose a lot of these finer edges of interesting outputs. So, but they just want to answer your question as accurately and articulately as possible. They're not overly concerned with it sounding great unless you tell it to. And even then, it's not great. When you tap directly into the APIs, you're kind of bypassing their overlays, their prompt interactions that they put on top within ChatGPT and Claude and stuff. You can get system level like prompting. So our prompts, when we're creating these manuscripts, sometimes are 3,000-4,000 character or word long prompts, because we are actually generating the prompts dynamically as well in the background based on the content. So we have that added advantage of getting to be able to go directly into the black box. That makes sense. And it's why a lot of people experience ChatGPT. They're like, this is nonsense. It's like, well, you're using a really kind of watered down version of the technology a lot of times in those equations.
Yeah, I love that. So, I mean, it's obviously shows the benefit of using a platform like Movable Type, especially when you're, there's guides and books out there for like how you can write your own book with AI, but they'll just utilize the GPTs and the Claudes and things like that. So it makes sense.
There's nothing wrong with those approaches. I mean, you do run into the issues we just discussed about.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, our IP, whatever you want to call it, the intellectual property of our company, in my opinion, maybe not the investor's opinion, but in my opinion, is the book frameworks themselves. So the way that we actually structure the books, because we're actually generating everything in real time, like separately, and then combining it. So we're not doing like a linear build, which kind of freaks people out. They're like, wait, how can it be cohesive? I can't get too down and dirty on the tech there, but in general, the idea is that we're able to produce much quicker and more efficiently, but we're able to get very specific with the structure that we want, and we're able to change that structure dynamically. So we can make the book have different types of sections based on the type of content. We can restructure, where what we open within the book. So like if the book is a more emotional topic like relationships, it might make more sense to open up with like a first person novella of someone experiencing the problem related to that chapter, right? Where if it's a more technical subject on advertising, you might not open with that novella of the ad person staring at the wall, wondering, so that's really the value we bring to the market. I believe is, you don't have to learn prompt engineering. You don't have to worry about book structure. You get to just focus on the big ideas and the extra context. So, it's ever evolving, and we have stuff on the roadmap that I'm super stoked about. I wish we had just more and more time to dig into those, but it's fascinating where this stuff goes, and I think AI is going in those two directions. It's hyper specific, hyper and value add creative technologies like Movable Type, and I'm trying to think of other good examples. Basically, AI that is like has a very specific purpose is on one end of the spectrum, and then you have the very, very smart, very, very expensive to create generalized models. So the ChatGPTs of the world, all that stuff, right? You're going to have, there's not much room in between, like the Jaspers of the world. They've kind of started solidified, like the generalized AI. It's a really, really tough market to crack into, but very specific, or if you have a lot of money, very general, it works. So I think you're going to start seeing more of these types of technologies getting a foothold in the market.
Yeah. And I think there's specific models anyway, although it's not mass market monetizable. I think it's you'll find your niches just like, the marketing agencies do, and, the coaches do as well. And I think if you can monetize like that, will create an amazing business and platform for that subset of people. And that's fine.
Right.
Like I think it's just, when you look at the money in the space and the investors and, and all of those kind of people, like they obviously want the mass market things. They want things that can mass market, but there's the trade-off of like it costs a lot and it's competitive as hell.
Yeah. Well, they want that, or they want the opposite, right? They either want hyper specific or hyper general, and not much in between. We found a big impetus of like what gets investors excited about what we're doing is some of the more like enterprise level things that are possible with this kind of engine. But there is this just incredible, and the reason we call it Movable Type is actually, I think, possibly the most important piece of this puzzle. You're obviously, I think most people are going to be on here are familiar with Gutenberg and the printing press, right? The printing press in the late 1400s, I think it was, it did something for reading that AI is doing now for writing. Before the printing press, to get a book cost at least a year's wages of a scribe, somebody to actually scribe it down, handwrite it for you. And like you had to create a secure enough environment so that like they weren't being killed. Like it's literally kings and priests and the Pope who had books. That was like it. And when the printing press came along, it really democratized reading. Every major revolution and change that we've seen in the last, 600 years or so, since 600, I'm not good at math, since it's all been based on the idea that you can spread information quickly. The printing press was the start of that. For us, we hope to play a small part in doing that on the writing side. I mentioned earlier, like, I have ADHD. Probably 80% of the people listening to this have it. I don't know how much I'd put that on the neurodivergent scale. But there's a lot of people who have much more severe kind of neurodivergent conditions, dyslexia or, just a plethora of them that make structuring information very difficult. They may be the most brilliant person. For instance, Musk, I think it's Asperger's. He's a genius in a lot of ways, but I bet you if you asked him to sit down and write a chapter of a book, he'd probably figure it out because he's a freaking maniac genius. But I bet you it's not the first thing he'd like to do. Actually, I don't know enough about that condition to speak for that. But with Movable Type, we're hoping to democratize writing. We're hoping to lower or change the entry level to get your ideas out to the world. Because as you know, you work with these folks all the time. To write a decent book, you need to either pay somebody a boatload of money, right? Ghostwriter. Or sit down, learn how to create a book, then get all your information down and spend hundreds of hours creating it, and maybe you'll get it right, right? Mm-hmm. AI represents, whether it's us or someone else, it represents the opportunity to democratize that writing, right? So that's really, to me, what it's the bigger picture of this stuff. I think we're right at the cusp of it. It's been a heck of fun of ride so far, but we're just gearing up at this point, man. It's going to start getting pretty crazy out there.
And I mean, a year and a half in, I think just from an outside perspective, like, looks like you guys are getting some level of success with Movable Type and Subtraction. So it's really fun to watch overall, Sean. And I take my hat off to you. Like, building software, I've got a software company myself as a partner. I'm not technical. I'm just like the pretty face of the bunch, but it's not an easy feat, right? Like, we've been building for 6 years, and it's been such a slug. And so I understand how difficult it is, but then to also market and get product market fit as well, like, that's a whole other game on top of actually building the thing. So, I take my hat off to you, Sean. Like, everyone who I see that interacts with your posts and content around Movable Type all love the idea, and I also do. So, great work, man, and congrats on the success.
Appreciate that, man. And right back at you from the other angle of getting the message of these folks you're working with and their books out to the world. There's a lot of, I was doing a video earlier and went on this tangent about, like, the impact that a book can have is it's hard to articulate because it's at a very small scale and an absolutely magnificent scale. So you might write a book that only 10 people read, right? But if it changes those 10 people's trajectory in life in a positive way, they influence other people, It's this snowball effect. There's no doubt that that's an incredible feat. Obviously, you've got the bigger impacts out there of hundreds of thousands of people being interactive with your book, but so many people don't get to experience that because of those things we talked about, like the time, the money, for me, I've sold just over 30,000 units of my book, and it's in a niche world. It's not a huge subset of people that I think I target with it, but it's a real joy to see people get stuff out of it. I hear from young people all the time, and that's really the beauty of it, is like they give me their story of what they did with the stuff they learned through my guide, and that's huge for me. Last thing I'll touch on, and it's something we probably won't have for another 6 months or so, but I want to end on this note because to me it's the most important thing we can create with this. It's nice to have a market fit. We're making amazing books, like, for people like you articulated earlier, where they're selling something on the back end. They've got this whole market spread, but and that makes our software much easier to sell, right? And that's why we started there. The thing we're working on in the background is a little closer to my heart. It's this interview approach of capturing people's lives and experiences. And I did hint earlier, I was going to show a brief little like audio demo. And we'll do this live. It could be absolutely terrible, but we'll give it a go.
Okay.
It's a little prototypey, but it should work. But the idea is that you'll be able to hand this to an older relative, father, grandfather, grandmother, whatever, and they won't even have to know. I mean, obviously you want to give them context of what they're doing, but the idea is to capture their whole life story through an interview, and then pull in extra context about where they're born, what their life experiences, all this stuff, and build 300, 400 page book about that person. Cool. We've all lost people in our lives where I'm like, there wasn't enough time to get the stories I wanted from this person. I love this person. I wish I would have. The goal I'm working towards is I'll show it to you, but is to capture those stories. Even if it's a book only a few people are going to read, it's a very important book in my opinion. So let's give this a go. Let's try this out. Okay, so I want you to listen to me as I'm telling my life story. We're going to start at the beginning, but I want you to ask me smart follow-up questions that pull out information from me so we can start working on an autobiography.
That sounds like a fantastic project. Let's start from the very beginning. Could you tell me about your earliest childhood memories and what it was like growing up in your family?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Ohio, Eaton, Ohio to be precise, just outside of Dayton. Small farm town, but, when I was younger, my parents got separated, I think around 2 years old. And, wasn't until later in life I started really analyzing that. But, for the most part, I feel like I had a really good childhood. It's thinking.
It's great to hear that you have positive feelings about your childhood, despite the challenges. How did the separation of your parents influence your experiences growing up? Did you find yourself developing any particular interests or hobbies as a child that you think were shaped by your early experiences?
Yeah, now that you mention it, I did draw a lot. I think, that as an escape was a powerful way for me as a child to create new things and experience new things where perhaps I felt like I was a little bit more in my shell just because of the family environment. But, overall, I still had a very happy childhood, but I do think that situation, it did drive me to be a bit more of a creative, line of work and experience. We'll wrap this up in just a second.
It sounds like drawing played a significant role.
So you get the idea. The premise being that any good writer, any good ghostwriter for that matter, they're going to know how to ask you the right questions to get the information out of you, whether it's nonfiction, that you're sharing your experiences with the world, your knowledge of the world, or if it's an autobiography or anything like that. AI is getting strangely good at it. And I think, as that just showed, I mean, it's with a bit more guidance. We're just at the early phases of that kind of stuff. And anybody who's seen, ChatGPT's AI demonstrations, they've seen the multimodal is what they call it, interactivity with it. It's getting wild. So we're working on that. And the idea being that you take that whole conversation, different parts of people's lives, and give it that beginning and end, the start and finish. So, to me, that's really our big win in the next, 6 months to a year. Obviously, I'm really proud of what we've done with the platform so far. I think you'll probably have a link somewhere for people to check it out. But even if, Movable Type isn't their thing and they want to be more on that writer's journey, I think being involved with you and your podcast here, what you're doing from the impact standpoint is super important. Marketing should never be underestimated as a force. So I appreciate you spreading that gospel. And I'll, I'm always a fan of that line of understanding for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think even just that, communicative style of asking questions and like getting feedback, like I'm sure it's going to apply to more than just
biographies. Yeah.
Biographies.
Autobiographies? That's what we're looking for. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. So it's going to apply to more than just that. Like the system will be able to ask questions about expertise and conduct a whole interview around, the book.
that actually will be the first version of it, which it'll be like, all right, you're writing a book about marketing books. It might articulate like, all right, what was your first experience eureka moment when you started marketing books with, one of your clients? Tell me about that. And then the beauty of it, as you saw, it's not that it just asks you a series of questions. It asks you follow-up depth questions. And that's what any good interviewer does in a, whether it's a podcast or ghostwriting specifically, you want to keep digging. And I was afraid it's going to get a little too personal there. So I was like, we'll pull back. But, I love the idea of capturing people's stories because, and I promise, all right, 30 seconds. I've been working on a book for years on this guy I'm obsessed with. He's in the 1890s, marketer, copywriter of that time. Love this guy's work. Obsessed with everything ever written about him, but he never wrote an autobiography. And I just found out that he kind of did, and I found it. And anyways, but the point being that if he would have captured his story, it turns out he did. So that kind of defeats the whole purpose of that story. Kind of forgot that I found that, but you get the idea. Like I would have been bummed if he never had written that. I think anybody doing anything impactful has an obligation to share their knowledge with the world at a certain point. So I'll leave you with that. But I'm stoked to be being able to work on this project, and thank you for give me some time to get on here and talk about it.
Yeah, and it's been a pleasure having you on, Sean. And so you've got the book as well, 7-Figure Marketing Copy. So if anyone wants to learn to be an awesome copywriter, the digital copy is available at
sean.co/copy, I think is the URL.
That will be linked below
for
everyone. Thanks. And of course, we'll link Movable Type below as well, so you can check out that platform. Amazing platform. And Sean, again, I just commend you so much for all the work you've been doing over there.
Appreciate that, man. Awesome time, and we'll see you on the next one. We'll do another one of these. I think we've got more to talk about for sure.
I think, yeah, definitely. Damn, what an awesome episode. If you've got a book that you're advertising or not yet advertising, and you want some book marketing advice directly from me, I'd love to set up a book marketing review with you. It's basically a 30-minute consulting session that you can get for free, worth $1,000, where we can basically dive right into everything that you're currently doing or not doing, and everything that you could do to sell as many books as possible according to your goals. So if you want to sell 100 books a month, 1,000 books a month, or anything in between, we can really help you outline a strategy to help you get there. To book your session with me, just click the link in the description below, smartauthormedia.com/chat, and you'll be able to book a time that suits you to go through everything with me so that we can help you sell some more books starting today. Look forward to speaking to you on the call.